After a late tweak to a 5-race calendar for the 2020 European Le Mans Series, we find ourselves back in Le Castellet at Circuit Paul Ricard for the Le Castellet 240. That's 240 minutes. A 4-hour race forms round 3 of the European Le Mans Series. We were here back in July for the opening round and of course had planned to be in the northeast corner of Spain at Barcelona for a night race, a Saturday night race at Catalonia, but sadly the current coronavirus situation in Spain, and particularly that part of Spain, means we can't be racing there. So a hasty rearrangement was done. That was announced at Spa last time we were racing with these cars, and we can look forward therefore to racing into the darkness in the south of France instead. Welcome along. My name's Johnny Palmer, joined by Bruce Jones throughout today. It's a busy one because the Michelin Le Mans Cup 2-hour, the Le Castellet 120 as it's being called for this round, and the Le Castellet 240 to take place on the same day. There is rain in the air. It's set to kind of be with us all day. It's quite blustery out there as well. Beautiful weather conditions yesterday, plus 30 degrees Celsius, but it's dropped by about 10 degrees into Saturday, and the weather very changeable indeed. Same format as usual though. We chisel off 2 minutes from the Spa sessions. These are 3 10-minute sessions therefore for the Le Castellet for GTE, LMP3 and LMP2 cars, and there are 35 of them, Bruce, to comment on, starting with these big grumbling GT cars.
I felt this morning as we left the hotel it was October, not late August here at the Castellet, and for the teams it's all about finding grip, and we've seen in the early sessions today that grip is in short supply, and certainly in comparison to plenty of testing they did in free practice and practice yesterday, it's going to be hard to find it in these outlaps, but with just 10 minutes it's super quick fire, Johnny, and don't get it wrong. And what we saw in the earlier qualifying sessions today is turn 7, the corner leading onto the Mistral Straight. Track limits, those 2 words that drivers deny they've exceeded, but race officials find them. We will see a lot of times, I'm fairly convinced, being lopped off some of these runners. They have to hope they get it right. It's driving at 99% perhaps, rather than 100. Yeah.
And as I mentioned in the Michelin Le Mans Cup session, I suppose these sessions are the times that you can make the mistakes because the penalties don't then lead on into the race. But the problem is time's even more precious than it was for the support category. We had 15 minutes for the Michelin Le Mans Cup. It's 2/3 of that for this particular session. In the GTEs, it's Castle Racing, number 74, that leads the championship, but the 2 Porsches from Proton competition are right behind. Also, the success ballast has been reassessed and reapplied. We'll take you through which cars are carrying extra weight once we get to the session being live.
What we're seeing is teams running out with tyres at the last moment. Just seen spots of rain on the windscreen. It started raining lightly about half an hour ago. There was a Ligier race and then it was declared a wet track. It goes to show just how much came down. But I would think for the majority of drivers it's slick tyres right now. And just bear in mind that Michel Bronicheski very nearly took pole position for the Michelin Le Mans Cup race. Aborted on his final lap. We couldn't quite work out why. Certainly got his teammate David Pirel quite agitated in the pit garage, but they're paired together, showing with Marcus Gomez. Not a bad little third driver there to have, but it'll be Bronicheski, the pole, who's going out in this 10-minute session. I think he's got to be good to rumble.
Certainly his name against that car at this stage. There's no regulation that says it has to be a bronze-rated driver. I wonder whether we might see 1 or 2 late changes to the current names on the screen. Let's find out. Car number 60, run by Iron Lynx, ably supported by AF Corsa, but it's a new name from a team entrant for 2020. Gladys Schiavone, Rino Mastronardi and Nicholas Nielsen are the 3 to take charge of the 60 car. I fancy Nielsen for qualifying, considering the other 2 are bronzes and Nielsen recently been bumped up to gold. Decision yet to be made, at least on our graphic, as far as the 66 car is concerned. Will that be Gunnar Jeanette? Most likely. Finlay Hutchison is the silver and Rodrigo Sales, the American, is the bronze in JMW Motorsport Ferrari. And final touches, including making sure the tyres are correctly bolted to the 51 there being made. Daniel Serra, rapid Brazilian driver, factory Ferrari man as well, being brought in to bolster that field. Christoph Ulrich and Stefan Gurig, because Alexander West is busy elsewhere.
Yeah, he's busy competing at the Nürburgring, getting his eye in for the 24 hours that's coming up shortly. But what a pro to put in the car, Daniel Serra. Whenever he comes over to Europe, not much was known about him. We knew far more about his father, Chico, who raced here obviously up to Formula 1, but late 70s doing his stuff in Formula 3, but Daniel just came over from Brazil and just is quick in anything he gets his tail into. Initially with Aston Martin and then obviously with Ferrari, but what a super sub to have. So his name is the one at the top of the screen. That's because his is the lowest number, because they're in numerical order on the screens at the moment, because this is the outlap, but there are spots of rains on the screen. No point putting those wipers on. You do it once, then you're committed to having the wipers on the whole way through. But earlier today, it seemed the corner at the end of the Mistral Straight, turn 8, that's the most fearsome corner on the circuit, that had a little bit of oil down on it overnight. That was spotted just before the first session, and certainly, and I'm afraid we've got one off already, and it's the Proton competition. That's is that Michael Fassbender's car? Yes, it is. So where is that going? Out of turn 7, is that?
On a damp curb, presumably. That's a big hit into the tyres, and unsurprisingly, red flag. It's the run out onto the Mistral Straight. That's exactly where you said it was. And these painted white lines, the painted curbs are so treacherous. I can't see that car starting. Well, obviously not. The race is today. I was thinking it was tomorrow, but it's later today. I think that's the 93 out on the spot. Both corners heavily damaged. He was involved in a crash here at Le Castellet at the start of the season, not of his making, into turn 1, and that is much more substantial. Michael Fassbender, who's also been dovetailing a campaign in the Porsche Super Cup, supporting some of the Grand Prix. I know he's in action at Barcelona, funnily enough, a couple of weeks ago, and getting more and more experience, albeit in a Porsche Cup car. But Proton Competitions team are looking rather dejectedly at the screens and the images of that. That was Michael's outlap, and a chance to test how much grip was out there. But I mean, it's like an ice rink. Once you get out onto the curb, it's not very high. Those curbs aren't particularly high or serrated, but they are paint. And we've had that rain during, in fact, one of the Ligier support races. And the painted area offers no grip whatsoever.
No, and of course at that point, all drivers, once they've got through the twisty first third of the lap, through that sequence 3, 4 and 5, those corners that come tight upon each other in the S's, it's all about getting speed out of turn 6, and then the corner, unfortunately, that leads onto the long straight, where you carry your advantage out of that corner the whole way up the straight, through Signon, all the way around to the double droite, the two right-handers at the top, and it was just marginally too wide, but it just meant that 2 of those tyres were fully on the curbing on the way out, as they would have been by almost all the drivers. The smallest of twitches, but just so unfortunate. Foot planted to accelerate up the straight, and red flag out. Of course, Johnny, one has to suddenly look at from the onboard, just the smallest of twitches over that red and white striping, and unfortunately for driver Michael Fassbender there, he knew what had happened as it happened, but there's no chance of correcting it at that point. So looking at the timetable, Johnny, of course, when you've got 10 minutes of qualifying, 10 minutes break, 10 minutes qualifying, 10-minute break, we do have a lunch break, but it's going to be very, very curtailed for a lot of the teams now. Good to see that Michael Fassbender is out of that green and orange Porsche, but unfortunately the Porsche is not going to be playing again. Good to see he's up on his hindquarters and moving about freely, so he's not hurt himself. But
and thankfully, this time it was not on his side of the car, clambering out from the left side, but the front right, the rear right, entirely, I was about to say beyond repair. It's amazing what they can do these days with GT cars. The problem is there's a race today at 6:30, and the car won't have qualified either, so they'll have to seek a special dispensation to actually start the race. But they're going to be up against it down at Proton Competition, and the tyres for that car understandably going back now to the trailer. That's going to be a busy old day, and they'll get the car back to the garage. First of all, just strip it down and see whether it's retrievable in any way. But that's going to be a long old day, as I say. And have they got the relevant spares? Is the next question.
Okay, the next thing I'm focusing on is it's the GT session clearly stopped, but 8 minutes 35 left in this session, so they've effectively lost 1 flying lap.
Yep.
They'll go out, do their outlap, and one of their flyers. And bear in mind that we've seen drivers losing qualifying laps for exceeding the curbs at the track limits at the very point that Michael went to the right of the circuit out of turn 7. Almost all the drivers will, I'm sure, unless they're really cautious, have 1 lap time removed, but the fact they're a lap down on their budget, so to speak, means they've really, really got to pay attention to track limits in what is already a really, really quick-fire qualifying session. Debris being cleared up there. Luckily, majority of the debris stayed out by the tyre wall on the right-hand side, it was the left-hand from the driver's point of view, side of the circuit, but there was a little bit of shrapnel that went back onto the track. That has been cleared up. Obviously essential for the 3 and 2.5 qualifying sessions that are still ahead of us.
He very nearly caught that.
Very nearly.
Because there was an adjustment of line, first of all, which was the car being lost. He then flicked it back from opposite lock, and it almost bit. It just needed a bit more traction from the asphalt rather than the paint, and then the second time it snapped, there was no coming back from that. But it's very interesting to see that incident. Now we can say Michael Fassbender at least has been able to walk away from it. That was the concern initially, just to see exactly the kind of various stages of that accident, and he will have seen the impact coming way before it was a reality, but far too late then to be adjusting. That's very, very tricky, and you know, Michael's just after track time really. He had a decent spar from memory, and need to track back now to the results to make sure that but he started from pole position, and that was quite a responsibility. I do remember that. The 93 car at Spa finished second with the pole position, so they did have a good race in Belgium. Just horrible memories of Le Castellet on both visits, sadly.
Yes, he won't put it at the top of his list for 2021. He will be back, rest assured. One thing I just want to point out, Johnny, just before the cars went out, we didn't necessarily have the the drivers for qualifying. We were talking about Michel Bronicheski. He isn't doing the session in the 74 Kessel Racing Ferrari. It's David Perel. Just seen him hovering around with his helmet on, waiting to take over that Ferrari. Let's go down the list. It's Daniel Serra will be out in the 51 AF Corsa. Ferrari Spirit of Race, Matt Griffin on board this weekend. Obviously a change of driver there with the Paccinis missing. Sorry, of course not. What did I talk about? It's a Spirit of Race car. He's his regular Duncan Cameron, Aaron Scott teammates. Nicholas Nielsen, we talked about him joining Iron Links. Finley Hutchinson in the JMW Motorsport Ferrari. That's the yellow one with the blue flashes up the sides and over the tails. David Perel, just mentioned him, the 74 Kessel Racing Ferrari. Proton competition, Alessio Picariello. And just for reference, on that outlap, he did bang in the Belgian banged in the fastest middle sector. That's the crucial one that is takes you all the way up between just before turn 6. You then accelerate, and then just before you get to Signes, about 3/4 of the way up the straight, that's the next timing beam to break. That's the second timing beam. So the Belgian flying up there in the other Proton competition Porsche. Michel Gatting in the Iron Links Ferrari, and obviously no longer Michael Fassbender in that 93 Proton Porsche. That's off the track, on the flatbed, the red flag still displayed. And this is the first of the 3 qualifying sessions, first the GTEs for the European Le Mans Series. It's a period of stasis, Johnny.
It is, and yeah, these are the tricky times in the weekend where you've prepared to come. I mean, think of the guys down at Proton competition. They've spent all of yesterday practicing the car and then prepping it for a qualifying format, and it's lasted a third of a lap. I mean, it's horrendous, but they will, you know, roll their sleeves up. The car's going to get back to the garage, and that's the only point where they can assess whether they can start to fix it. And it's going to be 2 corners that will need to be bent back into shape. Speaking of bending things back into shape, the Marshall's working incredibly hard there on the inside of turn 7, the little kink where the tyre wall did a good job actually in not spitting the Porsche back out onto the track. There, you know, there is a natural cushioning effect obviously about a tyre wall, but there's always the danger you get that recoil and the car ending back in the path of passing GT cars. That didn't happen and contained the accident pretty well. A chance just to get some airflow through the car. It is quite blustery out there, but I think when they shut the doors, ambient temperature's still, you know, in the mid-20s. So with the engine so close to, particularly the Porsches as well these days. I'm going to say the Ferrari's just the other side of the firewall, but the Porsche, even the customer cars now running with that new configuration of engine before gearbox, front to back. Iconic Porsche layout always used to be that the flat 6 4-litre engine hung out beyond the rear axle, but Porsche spotting the opportunity to move the engine around as per the regulations these days in modern GT racing, certainly ACO rules GT racing, where you could effectively put the engine wherever you want. You could have a front engine Porsche, therefore. That would be daft though, but they've moved it to be a mid-rear engined Porsche just between the driver and that rear axle.
Well, the delay as they fix that tyre wall is going to be a while yet. We're being told next information about the restart of the session will come at midday. Not the start of the session, restart of the session at midday, information about it. So they're racing to get the tyre stacks back into position. And just to reiterate, the accident happened as Michael Fassbender on his outlap in company with another car came out of turn 7 onto the Mistral straight, ran a little bit wide over the curbing, only a little bit. The car then just snapped away. He tried to catch it, almost did it, didn't do it, unfortunately, across the track into the tyre wall on the outside, and the stacks of tyres are now being put in. First stacks have done their job, and again, for the mechanics for Proton competition, they wait and see, is the car as bad as we think it is? But the tyre wall really did, you can see it compressing as it took the energy out of the car, and but it was the fact it was whipping around that sometimes does a bit more damage. If it's a complete side-on hit, damage is all in one, but it's that in one end and then the front end following in as well. 2 hits effectively, but I think the tyre wall probably did a miraculously good job.
Yeah, and not one of those tyre walls protected by the very large rubber belt that sometimes is put in place to contain the tyre stack. So that's the reason why we've had a bit of movement. Eduardo Freitas has also made his way down there, who is the race director, clambering up over the Armco, which is the protective backing to these tyres. That's the next issue, isn't it? Because the shockwave through that sort of 2 or 3 deep tyre wall has potentially damaged the Armco behind as well. As Matt Griffin looks on, he was due to take part in the session. He was out in the 55 car, in fact, when it was stopped with fireproof balaclava in hand. And you get the impression, therefore, it's going to be a little while yet before we get the session live again. He's not been called. More information about the restart of the session at 12 o'clock. Right, so 8 minutes away. So that's an indication that I think one or two of those Armco struts, the layers of Armco, have been damaged. Potentially the struts behind as well that offer the kind of vertical strength to these walls, but they can get buckled back. And I noticed one of the vehicles that's normally used to retrieve cars from a gravel trap has been utilised now to potentially push those back to their designated angle. The tyre stack repositioning is the easier bit. Another reminder, if you're just joining us, as to why the session has been stopped. A massive crash for Michael Fassbender, and I'm delighted to see that the Irishman/German can get out of that car and at least walk to the rescue unit. He'll be taken to the medical centre as a matter of course, not necessarily that there is an issue, but nasty things like concussion can take their time to surface, so he'll be given all the relevant tests. But that was a big crash, and 2 corners of the car buckling. But the first thing he did, naturally, get out, look at the damage, because you want to know whether he can be in the race later on today. Eager to get back on the horse, which is a good sign. No,
exactly so. Majority of the other drivers still sitting in their cars. Perhaps Spirit of Race have been clearer with their message to Matt Griffin. Get out, stretch. We'll let you know when you're going back in. But for the likes of David Perel, they're sitting on board. Finley Hutchinson, seen him in the JMW Motorsport Ferrari waiting to go. It's a difficult call. I would tend to get out of the car if my team told me it was 10-15 minutes. Probably because I couldn't fit in it in the first place. But for the majority of the drivers, they went out on slicks. It's continuing to rain a little bit. I wouldn't say it's on the cusp. I still think it's slick tyre conditions there. But it's unusual for this time of year for the circuit Paul Ricard to have grey skies and rain just coming in. We got a chance to see a different approach to the circuit yesterday. Flew into Nice and approached effectively from the northeast corner, the last drive in. But again, we're up on this high plateau. But just to the sort of northwest of the circuit, you've got that range of hills, and that certainly attracts a little more rain than you'd expect up here. But right now it's in that tricky track, slightly greasy condition at the moment, and it was cool overnight, and there was proper rain at about 7:30 this morning. And certainly the track isn't where the drivers would have thought it would be in terms of temperature and grip when they flew out here. So it's going to be grey all day. There will be rain, so we'll take it as it comes, but it's not quite the weather you expect when you think about Paul Ricard in high summer.
Next to no Goodyear tyre has gone down onto the track surface today either, because we've had a session for the Michelin Le Mans Cup qualifying, 2 lots of that for 15 minutes, a Ligier support race as well, and now the Goodyear rubber being used in LMGTE for all of the field. It's a control tyre, so the same specification of compound whether you're driving a Porsche or a Ferrari. Gilles Duquesne here, of course, to look after the Duquesne team. but also the Duquesne cars that he now owns. Used to be the Norma, but Gilles Duquesne and his organisation acquiring that manufacturer and the rights to build cars, so they are now known as the Duquesne M30 D08. So we have the Duquesne LMP2 car, number 30, with Tristan Gomendy, Jonathan Hershey and Konstantin Tereshenko, and 4 Duquesne M30s in LMP3. I can run through, whilst you have the opportunity, the success ballast that has been reapplied since Spa, and this is down to, there's confirmation again that a further decision will be made at midday in about 4 minutes' time about the resumption of this session. Success ballast can now be based on the 2 previous results, because we've had 2 previous races here at Le Castellet in July and Spa. It's also based on the top 3 in the championship as well. And you could have a car running as heavy as an extra 45 kilos. We're not quite there, but the 74 Kessel Racing car has 40 kilos for company because of good results recently, and it is top in the championship. The next heaviest car is the 77 Proton Competition Porsche. Christian Ried, Michele Beretta and Alessio Picariello, they've got 25 kilos. The 93 car, will that take part in the race? Not sure at this stage, but that's got 15 extra kilos. The one that Michael Fassbender has had that big accident in. He's due to be sharing with Felipe Laza and Richard Leitz. So 15 kilos for 93. And there are 2 cars on just 5 kilos. Matt Griffin's 55 Spirit of Race and the Iron Lynx Ferrari of Manuela Gosner, Michel Gatting and Rahel Fry, also with 5 kilos. The 3 cars at base weight, 51, 60 and 66. We only have to worry about success ballast in GTs. Engines being turned over down at 26G Drive Racing. Back to a 3-driver lineup there, and that looks very strong on paper. Roman Rusanov and Mikkel Jensen were well in the fight at Spa after actually a similar sort of crash for Jensen in Belgium, where he caught the curb at Pouhon. When it was wet, there's just a little bit of rain, and that spat him off into the tyre wall at Pouhon with another big crash, and that was his side of the car. However, Jean-Eric Verne joining them back in the team. He was in and out of it last year, you may remember, when he was dovetailing a campaign in the Formula E season as well. But Jean-Eric Verne set to join those 2 for the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So it's a good practice to get him back in the run of things from an Aurus perspective. The Aurus 01, Aurus being a Russian limousine manufacturer. It is an Orica 07 beneath the skin, but a bit of badge engineering means we have technically a different chassis maker on the grid.
We've also got at least another 5 minutes till the session restarts. The information about the restart is now pushed back to 12:05. It's 11:58 at the moment here in a rather gloomy, slightly wet Circuit Paul Ricard. Packed day though, Johnny. It'd be interesting to see how this format works. Qualifying for the Michelin Le Mans Cup, qualifying for the European Le Mans Series, 2-hour race for the Michelin Le Mans Cup, and we go deep into the night. We go into proper night racing for the 240, for the 240 of Le Castellet, 4 hours into darkness. And it was interesting being here up until about 9 o'clock last night, just seeing how much light stayed, 8:15, 8:45. It was about 8:45, wasn't it? We reckoned it was what you probably call full darkness.
Yeah, probably dig out a sunset time here at Le Castellet, but as you say, then the light sort of lingers for a little while, doesn't get to full darkness for a little while after that. So, we're guaranteed at least a good hour of full darkness, probably more like 90 minutes.
Yeah, I'd say about that.
Yeah.
Good to see Thomas Laurent back, fully fit again after his recent shunt, but I still remember, my first memory of Thomas Laurent was going to speak to him at Le Mans several years ago when he was this effectively almost straight out of karting, but driving a prototype, and he ran across the pit lane. A lot of drivers do that to get to the pit wall. Didn't look for the gate to go through. He just sprang like a gazelle over the pit wall, from a standing start. I thought, okay, you've been doing your fitness work, and you're still supremely fit. And again, when you get injured, if you're fit, you do recover faster. It's a sort of fairly proven fact. Didn't feel like that when I went back to playing rugby, but hey ho.
He's an Asian Le Mans champion from 2017-2018. No longer test driving for Toyota, but somebody who you should really keep your eye on, because he's the next big thing, definitely. And mean in an LMP2, having experienced so much in P3, the lower level of prototype racing. There was no warning of that at all. And okay, Michael may hold his hands up in the wacky conditions where it was raining, but never expected that.
No.
The sort of reaction you got from the car.
It was huge consequences for a very small mistake, I think is really the conclusion one can make for that. Still waiting for news about the restart. Another 4.5 minutes until we get that. But if you weren't here for the start of the qualifying session, unfortunately Michael Fassbender has damaged his Proton competition, the 93 Porsche, and we don't think, unless some miracle can be completed, that will be starting the race at 6:30 this evening. Now at least the Proton competition crew have got the car back on a flatbed in front of their garage, the penultimate garage in the pit lane, but it does look really rather sorry for itself.
Official sunset time tonight is actually 8:16, but we're going to have a good half an hour of gloaming after that before. And it gets very dark around here because they don't run often at night at Paul Ricard. I mean, the fact that it's Saturday possibly allows a bit more wriggle room as far as curfew times are concerned, but there's not a great deal of local residents near to here. It's a steady climb to the plateau where this track was built 50 years ago, 1970. So we are celebrating the half century for Circuit Paul Ricard in 2020 as well.
When it opened, it was like something from another planet. It felt just like the first of the modern circuits in so many ways. It had space, it had proper pit garages, and bear in mind that the tracks it was up against at the time to run a round of the World Championship for Formula One, you know, a lot of them were still pretty much as they had been in the 50s, maybe slight nod to building better pit garages, and suddenly they had purpose-built circuit. Of course, it was reinvented and given all this runoff it never used to have, but you know, back in many ways, it's a great circuit to come to. When you drive in, you feel as though you're turning into a golf course or an upmarket country club. It's absolutely beautiful facility, and it's a track used an awful lot. You can see when you arrive at the circuit, all these track days and schools that come here to play, because generally the weather's really good. Just talking about the weather, one little thought. Last night, when we went into what you described as the gloaming, that half light between sunset and full dark, bear in mind that was the end of a beautiful day, but this is going to be darker because it will be a lot of cloud around. It could well be heaving down, so maybe we will get the equivalent of 2 hours of poor visibility and darkness. In fact, the hardest time is when you're in that half light. It's better when it's fully dark and you're relying entirely on your headlights. And I think it's pretty dark around the back of the circuit. Certainly other tracks one goes to has a lot more lighting, but I'm not a cameraman, so I don't care. But I think it's more dramatic when you've got proper darkness. Then you've got the area where you flash past the pits as that pool of light, and then you're on your own chum after that.
You might care when our car IDs are starting to really suffer, because I'm assuming race numbers will be illuminated as they are at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, but that ensures that relies on us seeing the car from side angle. So it could test how well we know these cars in their new 2020 liveries after 2 races so far. Concrete blocks were arriving on the scene a little while ago, I noticed. I think it is still Armco there, but maybe to strengthen damaged Armco, which really is designed to take one big hit and then you kind of replace it all. So a quick fix required here. And that's the reason why Eduardo Freitas, our race director, is on the scene, overseeing the repair. And it's not even as if it can be quickly fixed and then reassessed tonight, because there is a lot of track action all to be completed today.
Well, the track action is not going to start for at least another 5 minutes, another delay until 12:10 now before we find out when the session will restart. But the damaged number 93 Proton competition Porsche down on terra firma may not be the easiest job in the world to now push it from the pit lane into the garage. I think they'll need some dolly jacks under that, because it's sitting down a little low on the left-hand side. Everyone else trying to keep their spirits up ahead of their qualifying sessions. This is for the GTE cars. We then had 10 minutes coming up after that for the P3s, and then the P2s get their 10 minutes. It's very, very quick fire, but it's all on hold at the moment.
I didn't know James Dayson was so talented in his little jig there. Canadian driver, joined by Malte Jakobsen, who was just to his right, our left, and Robert McGuinness makes that 3-driver lineup complete at RLR M Sport. They're eager to get their session going, but that's at least, 5 minutes we've got for the next decision, and the 8.5 minutes that remain for GTE. Christian Reed with the face mask on. It's his team, Proton Competition. He's one car down, but his car, the 77 car, still straight, and Michele Beretta, Alessio Picariello will be joining him. Picariello was put in, though, for qualifying duties, and as Bruce has already mentioned, the fastest middle sector of anybody. That's all that session produced, though. They don't get time through the first session because they're leaving the pit lane, and that's all we have to look at for the times. It'll be another best part of 2 minutes for an out lap. So you're looking at probably 6 minutes now to qualify these cars. No extra time added, and the clock stopped at the moment the red flag was put out.
Of course, one of the big questions is, how is the weather changing? From our TV truck, we have no windows. We're in a little darkened cupboard with screens and timing screens to look at. But the fact of the matter, none of the officials out there, including our race director, are wearing any jackets. Suggests it's not raining at the moment, but the clouds to the circuit, to the west of the circuit, starting to look a little bit more solid, so they could have a role to play. I wouldn't have thought it would happen during the GT sessions, but for all those going out in the third of these 3 sessions, the P2 runners, they may well have rain as a factor in the session. Just something extra to add to the mix.
No, totally, and it will make it a very, very different race and qualifying session from that we had at the start of the year, so that's a good thing as well. The Castellet 240, named as such because of the minutes that will be in the race rather than the 4 hours of Castellet, which of course was our opening event of the season. Now, had that been a traditional Porsche with the engine right at the back, that definitely could be race over. They're looking at it as if it might be repairable, you know. And, well, they've got 6 hours in order to fix that and try and get it ready as long as they are permitted to start. And the letter's probably being written now, the email, to be sent off to the officials. Will we be given special dispensation to start the race at the back of the grid, having not qualified at all? But yeah, the movement down at Proton is more positive than I was expecting. We haven't seen any of those traditional signals yet to say it's game over, and they are looking into the gearbox area, engine further towards the centre of the car than that. Also pretty tricky to have to do all the repair work with the face mask on. I know that most of the team will be in its own bubble, so social distancing not so much an issue, but they want to try and keep the face masks on for all of that work, but it's so tricky. Tyre stacks again being craned into a more appropriate position. They've been belted together, I notice, as well, with the tension belts. There's obviously a crucial bit of space required for all the engine and gearbox to work, the drivetrain, and it's question marks of whether the tub itself has been damaged too much. That whole floor section, carbon fibre, will come out, but they just want to know whether it's even worth starting the job right now. That's the reason why the torches are being shone into the very innards of the car.
And again, they're always looking for the suspension pickup points of those being bent, damaged, but I'd say they're still looking relatively positive. Another 5 minutes has been added to the delay. I mean, thank goodness in many ways, after the European Le Mans Series qualifying sessions, it was an hour and a half until the start of the racing action again, which would be the Michelin Le Mans Cup, due to kick off at 2 o'clock. But the clock is ticking. The mechanics can definitely forget their lunch today, but hopefully for Proton competition, you'll get the mechanics from the other car trying to help as well, because the sister car is just out on the pit apron waiting to go out and play. But I'm not a doctor. What can I say to this? My hunch, it's a little bit too damaged.
Yeah.
Because there are other elements of the car not so difficult to fix, but it's a longer job list. Just looking at the driver's window, the passenger side window is shattered. The door, the panels on the door are bent. But then again, have you got the spares? How easy is it to fix? What's the biggest thing? But it's back right corner that took the biggest impact. That was the first thing to hit the tyre wall on the outer side of the circuit, the left-hand side from driver's point of view. But Proton competition, they've had to mend bent cars before, and fingers crossed for them. Our race, the European Le Mans Series race, starts at 6:30 this evening. That's their only consideration in their race to get into the race.
Just about the most experienced Porsche team associated with ACO rules racing in recent times, anyway, in terms of, at a customer level, because Christian Reed, I think, still an ever-present in the World Endurance Championship. He's done every single race, and all with Proton. So you think about how much mileage that involves. They've almost always been entered on the ELMS grid as well. So yeah, if you're gonna need to have a Porsche repaired from this situation, then Proton are your people to do that. And there's another concrete block being located, isn't it, from another position?
Yeah. A position further away from the track to be taken to be put in behind the barriers. So for all the other drivers, not just the GTE drivers, but drivers in the P3 category and P2 waiting to go qualifying, you know, you could just feel their shoulders going down, trying to keep that momentum going, that focus. Will Stevens sitting aboard the little chair in front of the garage. He was thinking by now I would be out there either reaping glory or not getting it, not hitting the sharp point, but they're denied their chance, their focus for this morning right now.
Yeah, so the LMP2 qualifying drivers having to be even more patient than those we've seen at LMP3, because their session will come right at the end. Panis Racing, an adjustment to that name. You may remember it as Panis Barthez Competition, with the tie-in with the former French international goalkeeper. Fabien Barthez no longer part of that team, so Olivier Panis, his name and only his name above the door these days. Julian Canal with the Golden Arches sponsorship. The man from Le Mans, indeed, Julian Canal, and Nico Jamat makes up that 3-driver lineup. They have a platinum, a gold and a silver, who is Canal, and often starts the races. Still, Eduardo Freitas deep in discussion with those from the ACO, but also probably from Circuit Paul Ricard, who are overseeing the repair. Big thanks to all the marshals, once again working incredibly hard. They possibly didn't factor this bit of their day in, but they do need to be on call when it's necessary to repair circuit furniture. The 50 years of Circuit Paul Ricard flags are fluttering. It's a breezy day. Wind set to be with us for much of it, and potentially bringing different weather systems through as well. So changeable conditions, very much the forecast for Saturday.
And just to give you an idea which way the flags were blowing, it means the drivers have got headwind as they go up the Mulsanne straight. So they don't have that excuse, I arrived too fast because I was being blown up the straight and couldn't quite get into scene. It's in their face, which in some ways actually helps a little bit when you turn into scene. But then again, it's blowing right across you. You're trying to turn into the double droite, the double right-hander. And we saw a couple of big twitchy moments in the Michelin Le Mans Cup qualifying earlier today. Drivers on a track that had very little heat in it, plus a little bit of oil through scene, and then trying to keep that momentum through to turn 9, the first part of the double droite. Certainly very tricky for some early on. But down in the pit lane, it's sit around and wait. Now it's 12:20, we're being told, where we'll next know when this first session will start. It was only due to be 10 minutes in duration. That's the format, 10 minutes for each of the 3 classes in the European Le Mans Series. And we have lost the first minute and 25 seconds. They'll only have 8 minutes 35 when they go out to play in the resumption of the GTE qualifying session. And as Johnny pointed out, the outlap will be about 2 minutes. Then you've probably got at least one of your quick laps is going to be eliminated, because drivers tend to run beyond track limits. That seems to be the average, particularly with the most competitive drivers. So it really is about nailing a quick one and hoping that's going to be good enough. But you are under limited time. 8 minutes 35 still to play for, and certainly not going on track for probably one would suggest about 10 minutes.
No, at least that before we get another decision. So apologies everybody for the delay here. It's happened for obvious reasons after a nasty looking crash for Michael Fassbender. And in the meantime then, as we wait for the next announcement, which is about 6 minutes away, let's get some news from Hayley Edmonds in the pit lane for us this weekend.
I'm down here in the Proton competition garage, and as you can see just behind me, they are hard at work on the 93 car post-crash. I did just speak to the team boss, Christian Reed, who's just behind me. He said that he cannot give any insight right now. They'll need between 2 and 3 hours to give a bit more information as to if it's repairable. They have 5-6 hours in which to do it. It's extremely tight timing, but yeah, they're hard at work on it, and they here and between now and about 2 and 3 hours time they'll have a bit more information. Don't forget they're currently 3rd in the championship, so it's extremely important for them. They're doing incredibly well at the moment. So as I say, they're hard at work. Everyone is of course watching on, crossing their fingers that the car will restart for the competition tonight.
Yeah, and you can understand why it's going to take a bit of time for them to fully assess whether it's worth continuing as they take more and more broken bits off the car. as Haley says, third in the championship, second place result at Spa, and the pole position that was set by Richard Leeds. Michael Fassbender put in the car for the opening stint and did really well at the sharp end of GT cars. There were one or two prototypes starting behind him on the grid as well, from memory. So they're on 25. Proton competition, the other Porsche, number 77, second in the championship on 37 points, but leading by a further 7 points. Kessel Racing after a second place here at Ricard at the start of the year and a pole, and they won at Spa-Francorchamps despite the extra weight they were carrying. So clearly that car can be raced at speed with Success ballast, and it didn't really hold up its 3 drivers. So that's another strong lineup, and we've already got sort of pace setters in this shortened season. Michel Broniszewski, who's been racing Ferraris for, the last 5 or 6 years or more. David Perel, who is a very nifty silver, 35-year-old from South Africa. And Marcos Gomez, another silver. So they're not actually maximising their potential driving lineup. There's no gold or platinum in there currently. And there can be, as per the regulations, but it seems to be working well without. Here's the incident again, for those that are just joining our coverage. No warning whatsoever. Caught the curb as he went through the left-hand kink, the high-speed left-hand kink onto the Mistral straight. Corrected. I thought it might bite. It didn't. And then it spat him off to the left. And he sits on the left-hand side of the car, of course. Thankfully, it went in on the right-hand side. And all that protective area around the driver did its job superbly well. He'll be in the medical centre now being checked over, but it's a good sign to see always a driver being able to get out under his own steam and to the rescue unit that's on site.
Now, you were talking earlier about Proton competition having just so many years of experience with Porsches, and right now it's the ability not just to remove the broken bits of the car, it's to get as far in as possible to just see how many points have been damaged. And this is where, they might save a minute or 30 seconds with any particular procedure in this, but that will all add up, and they're going to be counting almost down in seconds to get this car ready in time for going to the grid. The race is due to start at 6:30. Maybe they'll buy themselves more time, but lose an extra lap by just going, we'll start from the pit lane. That gives us a fair amount more time, because there's no point getting a car out there that's not fully, perfect in the mind of the teams to go out racing. But right now, rain seems to have eased off. It's still a factor ahead of us. And session, it's going to be a very quick-fire decision, it seems. But 12:25 is the next time we get information about the restart. And all of this, we'll have about a half hour's delay ahead of we had half of the outlap of the GTE qualifying session, 8.5 minutes remain in it. But good news is the weather appears to be suddenly getting a little bit better here at Le Castellet for the 240.
A reminder then of our rejigged calendar, 5 rounds, and that's an amazing bit of work from all involved, those at the ACO, at LMEM as well, Le Mans Event Management, to organise practically the same calendar. I realise we don't go to Silverstone, but otherwise the other 5 races are happening. We were at Le Castellet at the start of, the mid part of July rather. 9th of August took us to Spa in Belgium. Back here at the Circuit Paul Ricard facility for Le Castellet 240 Saturday night race. 4 hours of Monza, the other side of the 24 hours of Le Mans, so that's over the weekend of the 10th and 11th of October, and the 4 hours of Portimao, as Portugal now comes out of a very difficult period of their COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, each country experiences it, it seems, at different speeds, and then there's the issue of second waves and how hard they hit as well. But Portugal now starting to be taken off various red lists around Europe, and it looks like that's well timed for us to head to Portimao at the end of October, start of November. 1st of November will be that race.
Well, fingers crossed. I think any visit to the Algarve International Circuit is fabulous. But to race there with all that gradient change, it's just such a treat. And you really get to test your cars through an incredible variety of corners. I mean, the first time I walked that circuit, I just couldn't believe that long final corner onto the start-finish straight. You can't even see down the start-finish straight. You've got that rise past the pits, then the drop to that fearsome turn 1. I think it's an epic circuit. So fingers crossed we can go out to play. Fingers crossed we can go out to qualify shortly, because unfortunately with this session, the first of the 3 sessions for the European Le Mans Series at a standstill. It's frustration all round at the moment, but track conditions may be improving during this time. There was a little greasiness, that's all it took to cause the problem we had with Michael Fassbender going off and having that unfortunate accident through turn 7. But it looks as though the wall repair on the outside of the corner there is just about complete. But the race director's still out there. He's got to take time to get back to the pit. So,
yes.
That will be one of the factors within. Down at Proton Competition, they're still pulling more and more bits off the back of the car. They're also starting to measure things, which suggests they're trying to see, is that car still true or true enough at the back?
Good to see as well. Just caught a glimpse of one of the 2 Algarve Pro Racing cars. They are allowed to race again now. You might remember they had a wild card entry in the World Endurance Championship race at Spa. That couldn't happen because Gabriel Aubry tested positive for COVID-19. He had been racing with Algarve Pro Racing in the ELMS event. So not only could Aubry not take his starting position in the WEC Championship with Jota, Jackie Chan DC Racing, it also took the whole of Algarve Pro Racing out of the equation and Stuart Cox's team. So we're well over 2 weeks after that now, and thankfully both Aubry and the whole of Algarve Pro Racing eligible for racing once again, which is great, because they bring 2 cars to the ELMS, and that means we've got a total of 15 LMP2s, 12 LMP3s, and 7 GTEs, at least for the qualifying bit, but the 8th car frantically being worked on.
And they're not just any old cars. The Algarve Pro Racing Oricas look magnificent with their sort of reversed race livery. One's more white than black and the other vice versa, and I think they've really, really stepped up their game for 2020. Of course, for everybody, it's a season that's just been curtailed, squeezed, rearranged, but we will still have the 5 rounds of the championship, and I think, full marks to Stuart and his gang for, raising the bar, and certainly for those lineups. It's just great to have them out there, and certainly Henning Engqvist with his teammates Loic Duval and John Lancaster. That is such a strong pair of support drivers for the Swede that you have to really fancy their chances. John Falb, Simon Trummer and Gabriel Aubry in the other car. It's strong, it looks good, so good we have them there. Course vehicles returning. I think that was the race director I've just seen on screen. They're returning in a Mercedes station wagon back towards the pit area. That is good news indeed. It's now 12:22 and a half. And the next decision is going to be taken at 12:25 when this qualifying session will be restarted. There's only 10 minutes all in. Now, in this case, after the delay, only 8 minutes and 35 all in. So it's about putting in a quick lap, and then you maybe go, having put that banker in, Johnny, go and see if you can improve on it, take a few more risks. But track limits, 2 words, but 2 words that don't look good on your report card.
What we tend to find is that a lot of the platinum and gold drivers that will take part in this session can stick in an early lap, which is so fast it's good enough for the fastest lap time that car's going to produce. But as you say, if it's outside the limits, a little bit more work is necessary. What you're not needing to do in this part of the race is preserve tyres. They are really at a premium in LMP2, but in GTE you can throw as many Goodyear tyres at your cars as you want to, as far as your bank balance stretches effectively. So we might even see cars pitting partway through the session. That was definitely likely to happen in 10 minutes. 8.5 minutes, tricky. And there are wet weather Goodyears as well being prepared, of course, should the rain get a little bit heavier. All this waiting around, radar having to be checked constantly as to what the next weather system will deliver. Michael Fassbender out of the medical centre and with a well-deserved coffee, but not a promising look on his face. I'm not sure. It's
1 minute,
optimistic.
under 1 minute.
But even he doesn't know whether that car's repairable at this stage.
Wet. I just came from the track and it's beginning to rain. The track is wet.
Okay. Well, there's confirmation.
Even more reason as Eduardo Freitas came back. I just want to correct myself. It was an Audi leading car. I saw the rump as it turned off the circuit. The station wagon that brought him round was an Audi. There we are. Correcting myself. And the car's already going toward pit exit. We were told the session restart. Well, the restart will be at 12:25. They said to be a very quick decision.
30
it certainly was.
Under 30 seconds to open pit exit.
David Perel, I think, is the second car. The 9 Lynx Ferrari at pit exit. David Perel tucked in behind, waiting to go. Still the 77, the sister Proton Competition Porsche. No tyres on that at the moment, but they're being brought out from the back of the garage.
10,
so one half of Proton
9,
Competition busy,
8,
the other focused
7,
on qualifying.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pit exit is open. Be advised that the track verges are humid. The curbs are very slippery. The curves are very slippery.
Yeah, and I think everyone probably realises that now after Michael Fassbender's incident. And he will come back fighting, that's for sure, whether that be today or the next time we see these cars in action later on in the season. But we keep our fingers crossed that 93 can be in the race.
There's a little note on the bottom of the timing screen. Track verges and curbs are slippery. They were before, but this recent arrival of rain, it was largely dry through the period while Michael Fassbender's car was being cleared up. But just to reiterate for the drivers, the rain is starting to come down now. Do not go over the curbs, particularly at turn 7. We've seen they can bite.
So Matt Griffin suitably neat and tidy on the exit there.
It was interesting as Matt Griffin, we were just watching him going through turn 7, as the edge of his right hand wheels touched the curbs, you could see spray coming off them.
Yeah, yes. It was kind of, Fassbender's accident was similar to what we've seen in Portimao actually over the years, coming out of that kink after the technical start to the lap, onto the long back straight there, and very often cars can run wide out onto the right hand curbing and be spat back across the track into the tyre barrier on driver's left, whether it's wet or dry. That's happened at Portimao, and yeah, it's less common here at Ricard, but obviously the results are similar. I think initially everyone's going to be quite ginger through senior corner, particularly careful again not to run out too far wide. Rahel Fry given qualifying duty and all sorts of steering input required there to get it through. Double droite, the double right-hander, funnily enough, now towards Garlabin, and again seesawing at the wheel, probably to build tyre temperature too, and yeah, on the brakes, that generates brake temperature, which from the discs then dissipates through the Goodyear tyre and helps to get them up to their operating window. But it's, well, ambient temperature, not as warm as yesterday, but still early to mid-20s.
Rahel Fry about to start a flying lap, and the difference between the start of this session and the start of the first attempt is that drivers are now using the windscreen wipers. We had little spots of rain, and clearly it's considerably worse at the moment. But Eduardo Freitas will not be shaking the hand of anybody who chooses to curtail this session. Our race day is super packed here at Paul Ricard. We've got the 2-hour race of the Michelin Le Mans Cup and the 4-hour race, the Le Castellet 240, to bring the day to conclusion. Starts at 6:30, ends at 10:30, but our lunch break has been eaten into, not because we need lunch, but because we need the time. Teams most notably need the time. But for the drivers in this session, going down the back straight, they're looking for a flying lap. The fastest one already, as he was in the first attempt, is Alessio Picariello in the sister Proton competition Porsche. So that side of the garage still has potentially good day ahead of them, while the sister car is hastily being assessed for rebuilding. But right now waiting for that first flying lap to be completed. Fastest through the second sector, Matt Griffin. You said he looked good out of turn 7 onto the Mistral straight.
Yep.
He's put the fastest time of anybody into that second sector until Alessio Picariello gets there. He goes faster still for Iron Lynx.
Lap 2 of car 74 deleted for track limits at D7.
So that is the effort from David Perel out in the Kessel Racing Ferrari. A lap deleted, the first of the session. So if you don't remember Nicholas Nielsen from last year in the European Le Mans Series, he was champion with Lusig Racing, and that pitched him from silver up to gold. A little bit errant on the exit of the final corner though. What's the time from the Dane? It's a 1:54.790. David Perel 1.5 tenths slower, and Matt Griffin looking good for much of that lap, but he's just a slither off as well. He drops to 4th.
Wait for Picariello, sure to go top. Yes, he does by, well, 0.282 of a second, but there was a massive twitch by Nielsen out of the final corner. It's a very tricky 140, 150 degree turn over the curbs.
Oh, yes.
What were they warned? Track verges and curbs are slippery, but he caught it.
He did. He did just about. Yeah, hung on to it. And some experience in these Ferraris. Windscreen wipers still the order of the day. So that awkward midway condition right now. Not fully dry, certainly not fully dry, but not fully wet either. So are they on the right tyres at this point in time? You would suggest that Alessio Picariello certainly is. He's almost 0.3 of a second quicker than anybody else. Time disappearing very quickly though. 3 3/4 minutes left on the clock on this shortened session.
And two drivers we mentioned, David Pirel, Rahel Fry also had her first flying lap deleted for track limits, and as you say, Johnny, that clock counting down, every lap you lose is really going to hurt. So Alessio Picariello fastest at the moment, he's banged in that lap and he's going even faster this time, so he's put his banker lap in, which is good enough for a provisional pole. What can the rest do? Starting to get a bit of a raindrop on the camera lenses around the circuit, so it's not improving.
Yeah, camera down at turn 11, certainly suffering because of that. They're heading for the long right-hander at turn 12 and then into Virage du Lac, Virage du Pont to end the lap, turns 13 and 14. You kind of got 3 cars circulating together, then a big gap, and then the next batch of 7. The remaining 4 cars in the session, and it's getting very close here between 60 and 74, almost to the degree that Nicholas Nielsen is posing David Pirel a bit of a problem.
Well, I think he is. I think David Pirel seems to have a little more grip. We haven't seen him having any twitchy moments. We certainly have for Nicholas Nielsen as he gets accustomed to the Iron Lynx Ferrari and running on his own, which is probably the sensible place to be. Will there be an improvement from Picariello? No. Track, well, he's almost half a second slower. In fact, almost all of them are. They're good at the start part of the lap, but not one of them improved in the final sector of the circuit. That runs from just before Seine through all the twisty corners, the Double Droit, the Garlabat, and then the really slow final 2 turns. And I guess it's just a little bit wetter there. That must be the solution.
I think so, and it's changed lap on lap towards the end of the sector 3 itself, although there is still precipitation on the camera. The end where turns 3, 4 and 5 come in quick succession too means that that's already a technical sector, of course, but you have to stay off the curbs there. Important to get a very good exit out of 7 that leads you onto the Mistral straight. Still 3 cars together, and the rear of those is Matt Griffin, and Matt still 5th with a 154.9.
Nobody's improving at the moment. I said it was important to put in a banker lap, but it was important to put in your non-banker lap, your flying lap early on, because the track is definitely getting slower. It's getting wetter, it's getting slower. Finley Hutchinson, unfortunately, one of the drivers who's had a track limit warning, time deleted, so that leaves him down 7th of the 8 runners, well, the 7th of the 7th runners, because of course the 93 Proton competition car is being fixed at the moment in the garage. No way is it going to get out in this session, but it's getting appreciably wetter out there. So I think, Johnny, we can say with a minute left, we can say the times are standing, except Nicholas Nielsen has not been told the message. He's gone faster than he has before in Sector 1 and Sector 2. He's in Sector 3 now. So hard to find a grip. He's got Matt Griffin tucked in behind him, but at the moment Nielsen's second fastest. What's he going to do? Out of the 14th and final corner down the start-finish straight, the target time 1 minute 54.5. 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's a long way off, and I wondered
it's the end of the lap.
Yeah, it can't make it work because that's where it is raining more than the other 2. But Matt Griffin had got closer there. David Pirel dropped back, and I thought, how's Griff actually caught at the time? Well, it's because it was a 2-minute lap from Nicholas Nielsen. And this makes sense to me from Rahel Fry. Why carry on in the session when you're going to risk losing the car and potentially having an accident similar to Michael Fassbender? The quickness of the track has gone. As you said, that was available for the first 2 laps maximum. Speaking of which, the 74 car off track at turn 1. Thankfully, no Armco or tyre wall to hit there, and the 74 car can carry on, but pretty much everybody else has called it a day because the rain has really started to descend, Bruce.
Yeah, their final sector times went down by about 5 seconds, so clearly no chance of improvement. Already the session was curtailed. They just have to rely on their times, and any driver who did have a time disallowed be really, really kicking themselves. But that session did belong to Alessio Picariello. He was going faster still on the lap that he curtailed at the end of the session. He's parked in the pits, and with that checkered flag out there, he's sitting pretty by 0.282 of a second. So
a great effort, Picariello, making those that weren't aware of his talent very much aware at Ricard at the start of the season, but done a lot of racing. He's racing in Asia, so applying his trade there despite being originally from Belgium. And it is a pole position, therefore, to the Porsche lower down, no, beg your pardon, second in the championship. Yeah, so that car, its first pole of the season, I think I'm right in saying. Yes, because there's already been pole for the number 74 Kessel Racing Ferrari and the 93 Proton Competition Porsche. So that's a third different pole sitter. out of as many races.
Well, tricky for those drivers in such a curtailed session. It was always going to be quickfire at 10 minutes, then it restarted with 8 minutes 35 seconds, and then the rain came. So any driver who had a time deleted has fallen back. But that said, the first 6 drivers covered by 0.6 of a second, and then Finley Hutchinson a bit away, but he had his best lap removed for exceeding track limits. So super tight out there. But Picariello and that Proton competition, the 77 car, the largely dark grey one, looks absolute class at the top of that field.
Yeah, and we can now speak to the man himself, Alessio Picariello, being talked to by Hayley Edmonds, who's down in the pits, hopefully finding some shelter as well from this latest rain shower.
I'm joined here by Alessio, who just got pole. Well, some good news in all of this of what happened, especially with your with car number 93, and of course your first pole of the year. Oh, sorry, something just fell on my head. So congratulations. How did it go for you?
Well, conditions were really very difficult, but I love this kind of conditions. I always loved it back in the old days in karting when it was drizzling with slicks. But so it took off a bit of pressure from me because I love it. So, and I had fun. So I'm really happy to get my first pole of the season with Proton competition and Porsche. And but I'm also sorry for the sister car. I hope they will put the car back to track for the race. But yeah, on our side, everything went according to plan, and yeah, just great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Alessio, 27 years old, making his first move into European ACO racing, has raced in the Asian Le Mans series at GT level with teams like Absolute Racing in the past, but yeah, first of all started, as he says, in karts and then on into Formula Renault, the Northern European Championship. ADAC Formula Masters as well, was champion of that in 2013. So it might be a new name on you, but he's been around the block for some time, racing in Asia. Together with things like Super GT and GT World Cup as well.
Yeah, GT World Challenge. I've watched him a lot in the past few years, and he is a driver who can really put it out of the bag. One thing I always love is when a driver's got it right in changeable conditions, they like to say, these are the ones I love. They're thinking, I was that far away from dropping it. But it's putting it out there to your rivals. You might not like the rain, but I love it, whether you do or not. It's a little bit of warfare, but he's a really genial guy, and he's really delivering. I mean, for him, having competed comprehensively for 5 years over there, it's good for him to be back in Europe.
Yeah, and was able to race at his home race last time out at Spa-Francorchamps as well, of course. So the GTs are done. It took a while to get there, and thank you for your patience if you stuck with us throughout, all because of a huge shunt for Michael Fassbender. But it's great to see that he's okay. He's back in the garage, supping on a cup of coffee there and looking at whether that car can be fixed. But great to see that Michael's eager to get going again if that car can be present on the grid at 6:30 tonight. This is how they will line up in the GTE part of the field. A 154.508 is Alessio Picariello's time for Proton competition. A first pole of the year for 77. 60 will start alongside it, just over a quarter of a second slower from Iron Lynx. AF Courses number 51 Ferrari starts third, just alongside the Kessel Racing car of Switzerland, number 74. Then we've got Speedo Race and Iron Lynx completing row 3. And now, after somewhat of a wait, all being well, 12 LMP3 cars will be working their way out into the working area of the pit lane. We've got a mixture of Ligier JSP 320s and the Duqueine M30 D08, all powered by the same Nissan engine though. And these cars always had to do 2 long pit stops during their race. Here at Paul Ricard, it's 2 150-second stops from pit in to pit out. It's time between the 2 timing loops there. They're going to have to do 2 short stops though as well because of this very thirsty new Nissan engine. And unfortunately, Orica had rather underestimated its lack of fuel consumption. They've done all that they can to try and fix the problem, and it looks like it's going to linger on for the whole of the season. So it does mean that each of these LMP3 cars will have to pit 4 times through the course of 240 minutes. And that gentle buzz, the idle of the 5.6 litre Nissan V8, 12 of them, and they will burst into life. They just still sound as good as the old engines, a little bit more brake horsepower as well, but it's that extra BHP which has rather in an unplanned way, affected them. And Orica scratching their heads to try and solve the problem. Some forceful bulletins from the ACO to Orica to iron out the issue, but it's going to be long-winded, sadly.
1 minute to go until the session starts. 10 minutes of action. It's going to be tricky action indeed because the rain is heavier than it was before.
1 minute to open pit exit.
Proper rain falling with 1 minute to go on the windscreens. Just something else to focus the minds of the drivers. The drivers had to keep them focused with that half an hour or so delay after the accident at the start of the GTE session. So hopefully they're now cool, calm and collected, going out onto a track that is going to be cool, wet and slippery.
It is, and a lot of these cars will be on slick
must have rain
tyres.
lights on. The track has been declared wet. All cars must have rain lights on. We're under 30 seconds to open pit lane.
So yeah, wet track means that you are legally allowed to use wet weather tyres. The rain light has to be on as well, which is the extra light which is carried on the bullet, the little cheese wedge shaped part of the carbon fibre that sits immediately behind each rear wheel. And because it carries that tail light, it must always be present.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Pit exit is open. LMP3 qualifying session has started. Please remind drivers any laps done beyond track limits, if reported or noted, will be deleted.
I say present because that cheese wedge can often be knocked off when they get to the combat stage of the day, i.e. the race. It needs to be fixed and at the next pit stop, and it's always tricky because sometimes they're just dangling by the cable that powers that tail light, and all sorts of concoctions to try and fix them on the spot. You want to try and keep your race clean for that reason and many others. There is a lot of rain around. I realise we're now travelling at speed courtesy of the number 9 Graf car of Vincent Castellet, but this is their first opportunity, the LMP3 drivers, to just discover how much or how little grip is out there.
Yeah, watching these drivers on their outlap twisting their way through the S's of turns 3, 4 and 5, front moving away, but when you ride on board, the sheer amount of rain coming up. Of course though, these cars have much more downforce than GT cars, so it's not such an issue at this point, but for all of these drivers, the track was very, very different yesterday. Weather was a whole lot warmer, 10 degrees warmer. A car off at the side of the circuit, out of turn 2. Just trying to identify who that may be, or have I got, well, number 7, there's the answer to that question.
Car 7 is stopped on track. Yeah. Car 7 is stopped on track.
Yep. That's Colin Noble, unfortunately, for Nielsen Racing. So sharing with Tony Wells, but at the moment he's literally gone out of turn 1 through turn 2 and pulled off to driver's right off to the side of the circuit, and it's going again.
Well, that's good that he was given the time to do an electronic reset. The lights went off, they came back on again, and the sign was good as wet weather Michelin tyres are now being prepared. All the cars in this category run on French Michelin rubber, and they have the choice of the slick or the wet weather tyre. No intermediates in LMP3. Number 16 with a moment as well. This is Gustas Grinberger back into the ELMS after action last year with the team Oregon, and he now races with BHK Motorsport. Did gather up that moment though at senior corner, and a similar situation for the number 2 of Wayne Boyd. 2 pole positions to his name already. He's not going to get a third doing that, but you're allowed to, you know, test the levels of grip for your outlap before you fully commit then for your first flyer. Man, that was well into senior before it suddenly snapped left though for Wayne Boyd.
At that point he'd been thinking, thank goodness it's an old school circuit with very modern world runoff area. And in fact what it has done, he wouldn't have wrecked his tyres at all there because it's a slippery surface. He's got the traffic away from in front of him. He can say, I was just trying to, you know, make sure I wasn't caught out.
Make the gap, yeah.
He's coming slowly through, well, everyone goes slowly through turn 13, penultimate corner, turn 14 even tighter, but right now it's about winding it up and just thinking, track limits, do not exceed them. So waiting for the first flying laps to come in. In fact, it's a whole gaggle of cars. In fact, we've got half the cars in the pit lane. They've decided slick tyres. Who are you kidding? I'm coming in for rain tyres.
Seems a sensible decision right now. Laurence Hoare has got over half a lap in order to get to that sanctuary of the pit lane. He is on to his first flyer, but many other cars not risking it. Vincent Castellet is going to go for a quick one. Garrett Grist for Nielsen Racing and the number 10 car staying out there as well. And many others, having now switched to grooved tyres, you have to think, are now rejoining the session, like Duncan Tappy in the number 3 United Autosports car. Colin Noble after that electrical issue. Into the pits, back out again for Nielsen. David Drew for Real Team Racing, also with different tyres.
Yeah, I think anybody who's stayed out will be coming in one further lap to see if they can make it work on slick tyres, but I think they'll all have a story to tell. So the fastest lap doesn't exist as yet, and here we have just 6 minutes remaining in this session that really is quick. I like it. I like the consequence and the fact they're having to just gauge the conditions. If it was on a bone dry circuit or a fully wet circuit, then at least know exactly what the conditions are, but they're changing all the time. Number 4 running very wide indeed. That's Lawrence Hoare.
Yeah.
And he knows these cars super well, but I think he's about to abort another lap. He's going through the final corner, almost standing still.
He nearly pitted by accident
Yes.
there, because the car was floating and just drifting through turn 13, and I didn't think he was going to abort because he was the right side of the white blend line, a 2:15.4.
You know what? I think he thought it was the old pit entry where you come out of turn 14 and then look for the pits, but it's now out of turn 13 because he set the fastest lap, the only one he's now been toppled, but it was a 2:15.4, almost at a standstill through turn 14. Now Garrett Grist, the Canadian, has gone top for Nielsen Racing, 2:12.4, but these times are going to be obliterated when we get the first of the runners on wet weather tyres coming through on their laps. But it may well be the next time around. But even on these wet tyres, even if they're going around weaving, trying to warm them up right now, I think they'll still be quicker than those tyres from Grist and Hoare.
So Garrett Grist, that car has been pit stops on this configuration of timing. No, we're not, because it's qualifying, so can't tell whether cars have been in the pits to change tyres. Garrett, 2:12.1, that might be slicks actually for the Nielsen Racing car. Many others though, like Wayne Boyd, have now switched to the treaded tyre. Duncan Tappy definitely has. Luis San Juan for Graf into the pits and back out again, and Colin Noble into the pits for a second time. So the out lap became an in lap for the man from Edinburgh. Very wide indeed towards the double droite there for Nico Kari, who is gold graded now by the FIA, and that's the reason why that has to be a 3-driver lineup for Nico Kari. He is limited to not much driving time at all now, formerly silver. There's not much grip through Virage du Lac either. You've got a white line right in the middle of the road, and that's like an ice trick. It's very tricky to avoid that, considering it's basically on the racing line. So United Autosports calling their cars through every single individual sector to make sure that Wayne Boyd and Duncan Tappy haven't found any scenery around Circuit Paul Ricard. That's the case for every team down the order. This is high tension stuff. Well, far more than a usual qualifying session.
We've only got 3.5 minutes remaining. We've only got two lap times on the board. Yeah. They're 3 seconds apart, but rest assured the charge of the Light Brigade, the cavalry, is arriving. And well, this one is going to be decided in the dying few seconds, because it'll be a while before they get the temperature properly into those wet weather tyres. Okay, let's see if this is a representative flying lap about to be completed. The time to beat 2:12. It's actually slightly irrelevant, because anybody who gets a sensible lap will go faster, but don't forget they're on their out lap after changing onto the wet weather tyres. They've got to do next time around, and already we're having drivers with car lap times being deleted. Car 7 went wide at turn 2. That was Colin Noble. We know that because we saw him pull off, so that doesn't really make any difference to anyone.
Grist didn't improve. He got blooming close to it though. 2:12.422 remains his best. He did a 12.470, so there was only 0.05 of a second difference, but it wasn't a better lap. 2.5 minutes to go now, and this is slightly more like it. Malte Jakobsen, 2:08.9. That has to be with wet tyres. Real Team Racing working their way through Virage du Pont, and Real Team currently 8th. David Drew doing the qualifying. This will vault him surely up to the front couple of rows, the front row. And Duncan Tappy goes quicker than both Jakobsen and Drew. So United Autosports number 3 car with a 2:08.8. Jakobsen 2:08.9. David Drew 2:10.7. Nigel Moore for inter-Euroball competition 2:11.1. But there are bigger gaps through between these times than we have become used to in an LMP3 category. Obviously, far greater variety in terms of lap time, because conditions are so unpredictable. But
just to give you a guidance, in the second free practice session that ran into the night last night, 1:51.1. So we're talking about a lap time some 17 seconds faster than this. That is how wet it is, and DKR Engineering just running very wide indeed, almost elbowed off the track. That's Lawrence Hoare down in turn 1. So all the cars out on the track, 12 in all, but it's tricky, and number 16 go for a massive moment there. That's Gustas Grinberger. He's joined the championship, very last minute deal to come back and play for this event, and he's had a hairy, scary sort of session.
Yeah, and still very early on in his career, Gustas Grinberger. Great to have him back. Obviously fell between the cracks when Oregon decided not to enter in the 2020 season, so he's been waiting for an opportunity, and here it is with BHK Motorsport. And again, a little wiggle coming out of the final corner to head across the line. It'll be an improvement. Third position for Gustas Grinberger. Great effort there for BHK Motorsport.
Time for one more lap for him. 30 seconds left on the clock, so he's on to his final lap. Hosted by the drivers RLR M Sport, seeing where they can end up. Their second fastest with Malte Jakobsen. Will they go top? I think they will. Yes, he does, by 1.2 seconds. That's a good lap from Jakobsen. He's got one more go.
Yeah, 1.2 seconds is very large indeed. Have to track back through the archives to work out what the biggest gap in LMP3 has been. Certainly not comparable to 1.2 seconds, I would say, because these sessions in the dry are renowned for being so tight. Checkered flag is out, and Duncan Tappy won't make it onto another lap. However, Real Team Racing will. So that's where the line fell between David Drew's number 8 car and the number 3 of Duncan Tappy. David Drew will understandably keep the speed high as he heads towards the complex at turns 3, 4 and 5. Meanwhile, the number 2 United Autosports car of Wayne Boyd looks unlikely at this stage for the Ulsterman to take a third pole position in a row in the ELMS. Let's see, out of Virage Dupont, he will surely improve his position, which is currently 10th. Wayne Boyd jumps up to 3rd, and that will mean probably a second row start, depending on who else is going quickly behind. Malte Jakobsen, though, resting on a 1.2 second advantage. Nice position to be in.
Only a few cars left to take the flag, and one person who's got he's completed his lap 11th place for Lawrence Hur. Bear in mind his pedigree as a former champion in this. We saw him have some twitchy moments, so they won't be too happy. DKR Engineering went off at turn 1/2 earlier in the session, but right now it's looking very good at RLR M Sport. Anybody about to make a final move? I think we've pretty much had everybody through the checkered flag.
Yeah,
so 15 and 3, Jakobsen and Tappy, they are the top 2. So short, quick fire, short session, changeable weather conditions, throw those into the mix, and that's how you've got that big gap. Normally it wouldn't be over a second, but 1.288 seconds, that's the margin that Malte Jakobsen has over Duncan Tappy. Wayne Boyd in 3rd place, just a whisker behind, another quarter second back to Nico Kari for Euro International. They're the top 4. 5th place, Nigel Moore for Inter-Europol competition. But tricky session there for the P3 runners, Johnny.
It certainly was, and all smiles down at RLR for understandable reasons. I have a feeling that's their first ever pole in the ELMS, but certainly that is the case for this season and 2019. I'm just flicking through the various bits of digital paperwork that I've got at my disposal to confirm that, but a big grin for the guys down at RLR M Sport. They were championship winners in 2018, of course, but they didn't take a pole all season, so no strangers to the top step of the podium. I think that may well be their first pole in ELMS history, certainly in recent memory anyway, over the last 3 years. And James Dayson, a big grin on his face, be assured of that, behind the face mask. He gave us a little dance pre-session, and probably do the same again at the end as well, after great work there. So,
well, it's always great to achieve the pole position, but those were in really trying circumstances. It was easier to get it wrong than to get it right, and certainly number 4 DKR Engineering, they'll be frustrated down in 11th place. In terms of the natural pace of that car, they should be up at the front end, but for RLR M Sport, Nick Reynolds and the guys, that's very promising.
I'm confused by the timing screen because it's been righted, and David Drew for Real Team Racing are now at the sharp end. Have RLR late in the day had a time deleted? I have to say I was burying myself in the paperwork to confirm.
No, I think Did David Drew, was he one car left out on track? Did he just cross the start-finish line before the checkered flag, and we thought it was afterwards because Jacobson's time has stayed the same?
I called it that he'd squeezed an extra lap out of it, and that was the crucial one. Goodness me. Apologies, we overlooked that. 207.207 for David Drew. Calling RLR as the first pole ever. They don't get it, and they were applauding down in the garage. That was another confusing moment for me as well. The Swiss team, Real Team Racing, hit the track at the perfect time, and David Drew snatches it by 3.5 tenths. Malte Jakobsen has to make do with the disappointment of a second row start, and it'll be an all second row for United Autosports, Duncan Tappy and Wayne Boyd. Nico Kari for Euro International in the number 11 car, 5th, and Nigel Moore in 6th position for Inter-Europol competition. It's not often I'm caught out like that.
Well,
but
he was the last driver
to
to
last
take
car on the track, and we have to keep paying attention.
Exactly, and he was he's about half a lap behind the other cars. The other cars in a great big gaggle, and it all looked absolutely nailed on for RLR M Sport, but it was always going to be as the drivers were getting used to their wet weather tyres on a track that was changing and becoming wetter and wetter. Always going to be right at the end of the session. So great job from David Drew. He's had some good runs in practice here. He's really made it pay for the Swiss team. But quarter of a second in the end, but certainly for the rivals, it was a question what might have been. But again, these sessions, they're not short on interest here at Paul Ricard. But of course, the drivers don't park their cars and come back to race tomorrow. They're racing today. Our race, the European Le Mans Series race, starting at 6:30. Down at Proton Competition, they're still working away, and they will be for a long time to fix that 93 Porsche.
So a session you needed to stick with for the duration and well beyond the 10 minutes, but it didn't matter because David Drew had literally, with the skin of his teeth, got an extra lap out of that session, and it was the all-important one to vault up to pole position. And I think actually we went through a spell where the final sector was very, very wet. It looked like nobody would be able to improve, and maybe a let-up in the rain created the required grip. Good traction out of the final corner at Virage du Pont to snatch pole position and take the smile away from James Dayson. So a bit of realignment from Haley Edmonds as well to move from one garage to the other. And we will get some reaction from Real Team Racing in a moment or two. LMP2 next. 10 minutes worth of qualifying for 15 cars in a moment or two. But let's hear from David Drew's teammate down at Real Team Racing, Esteban Garcia, chatting with Haley.
So Esteban, a fantastic result, David. David just got the pole for you guys despite the changing conditions. First pole of the season. How do you feel?
I feel particularly proud from David, and really happy that all the work we were doing during all the year, now we concretize this with a pole. So I'm very, very proud and very happy for David and for the team, because everybody was working hard for that.
And just a word on the race later on today. How are you feeling going into that?
So today it was not so easy because of the weather. Of course, it's changing. We don't know what will happen later. At 6 we will see the weather. But anyway, we have to take all the time, and I hope that everything will be good.
Thank you very much.
Esteban Garcia chatting with Haley Edmonds, and very happy indeed he is. He'll be soon to celebrate with David Drew, the pole man, for the first time this season. Real Team Racing get a pole, and it couldn't really have been much more on the edge during that lap. As I say, amazing drive off the corner, which will have helped him no end, but tricky to stop the car, certainly at the run into Virage du Lac. Senior corner, always treacherous in these halfway house conditions as well. Track still declared wet for the third and final qualifying session. Rain lights obviously on, but on low mode, we're told. That's to do with their intensity and also how often they flash. The wheel nuts of the G-Drive Aurus, though, are still on the floor, so they're leaving their decision to take tyres, which tyres, until very late indeed. Is it even worth not partaking in the first couple of minutes to leave your tyre change to, partway through the session, and then bolt on wets or dries, whichever are most relevant, to then push on? It'll be, I'm going to guess, Jean-Eric Verne at the wheel of the Aurus.
Yeah, I just having a look as the door closed. I think it's him. Sort of that would be a fairly typical sign, you know, always putting up the fingers to the cameras in the nice, friendly, competitive way. But every clue that could be brought into the equation is being considered now. You know, you're checking all the weather apps, looking out the pit garage. Remember, the rain was heaviest at the end of the lap, just at that critical corner as you get to the top of the Mistral straight. Turning into Scene has been a problem. More to the point, turning out of Scene has been a problem. But right now, I have a feeling, even though it's declared a wet track, that the rain is a little bit lighter. We'll get clear vision of that once the cars start going around the circuit and we're treated some on-board footage. But at the moment, the cars in the pit lane sitting there with intermediate tyres being put on.
Yes, and that's crucial. Inters are permitted and built, indeed, in the LMP2 category. So these are the tyres that have been in use in the World Endurance Championship since the start of their season, which, remember, stretches all the way back to Silverstone in the middle part of 2019. But yeah, because they are also utilised in LMP2 in the WEC, there are 3 levels, either full slick, full wet, or that halfway intermediate tyre. Compounds have been chosen by each of the tyre manufacturers. We've got Michelin and Goodyear represented in the entry. 4 Goodyear shod cars, being the 2 from Algarve Pro Racing, cars 24 and 25. The number 31 Panis Racing car of Julian Canal, Nico Jamat and Will Stevens, and the 4th and final car on Goodyear rubber is Francesco Dracconi and Sergio Campana. So the other 11 cars all run with Michelin rubber and very different types of compound. There's 3 different compounds produced as far as the slick is concerned by both Michelin and Goodyear, and they have decided which tyres are available to their customers. But with this race running into the night, cooler temperatures predicted, and therefore a harder compound required purely for its durability.
Reconnaissance is absolutely crucial in this session. This lap is for assessing the situation. Was I right to put it on intermediates? Should I have gone with wet tyres? Am I foolish? Am I on slicks? I don't think anyone's out there on slicks, but well, 2 cars going off at Scene, but 1 reversing out of the action. Car number 30 going for rotation. That's Jonathan Hershey for the Duquesne team. So he got very close, the tail of the car in front. Sorry, it wasn't at Scene. It was
corner after that, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I think that compromised him, and round he went. But I said it's reconnaissance is everything. Now, you've had a lap to assess what the situation is out there. What's going to happen next?
Well, we will be paying attention to the very end and beyond it, be assured of that, because I have a feeling if track conditions start to improve, the pole lap could be the very last one. Having already been caught out by that by the LMP3s, I'll make sure we know which car is the last to circulate, side by side down towards turn 3, as the BHK car battles for track position with Dragon Speed. And Sergio Campana on the inside, the Dragon Speed car being piloted by Mancunian Ben Hanley. Dragon Speed did not have a good Spa-Francorchamps. They discovered a fuel cell issue very late in the day and had to start that race from the pit lane and a lap down. It was a double whammy for the American squad.
Already cars losing laps, their out laps, doesn't really matter, but for exceeding track limits at turn 7 and turn 13. 13 is a classic case. If you exceed track limits there, it's not because you're trying to, it's because you just don't have grip at that penultimate corner, the tight left-hander. Right now, who's going to pull the quick times? Fastest in the first sector, Thomas Laurent. Fastest in the second sector, Sergio Campana for BHK Motorsport. But who's going to string together 3 really good sectors? And we're seeing cars really, really twitchy out on the circuit. Sergio Campana having a little bit of a wobble, and he won't be alone in that. And again, when drivers are running close to those around them, was that the Dragon Speed car off and rejoining for the double droite as 2 other cars try to come past.
I didn't think there was the track space for that to happen, but it just about worked. And Jonathan Hershey now is fighting for space as they work their way through turn 11. Garlabau's turn 12, the lingering right-hander, and Hershey's all over the place again, just caught a wet patch with the rear tyres there and did incredibly well to hang on to it. He's favouring the tighter line at Virage du Lac, but he does have Ben Hanley to his outside, who will now have the racing line, I think, although did Ben pit? picking out the Dragon Speed car. It's not there. It's been red flagged. And yeah, the 37 Cool Racing car was very slow. That's one of the Algarve Pro cars, isn't it? 24 or 25?
I think it's 25. It's more white on the back of the 25 car.
It's not. It's neither of them. It's the 20 car. It's the high-class Racing Anders Fjordback car, which has found the fence by the look of the front left headlight. And there's also some damage to the nose of that car as well. So where's he been off? Very tight framing of that car makes it tricky to work out. Somewhere where there are the blue high friction lines.
Well, the car's listed as being stationary at turn 13, the penultimate corner of the lap.
Okay, yeah.
Again, unusual camera angle. It's not a corner we see shot from that angle, so it's another camera that's been told to swing around there. So no flying laps on the board. Is this familiar? Is this a GTE session revisited? So nobody quite got round to complete a flying lap, so the pressure goes up. But this time they don't have 8 minutes 35 when they rejoin, it's 5 minutes 55.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So we talked about the GTE car in effect, GTE session in effect being 6 minutes rather than the advertised 8.5. By the time you've done a 2 minute outlap, even 4 minutes. Ah, okay. Yeah, the car leaving the track in an unusual position. Was that not between scene and turn 9? Rather than further around where it's being displayed as stopped. Difficult to tell.
I'd like to see that again.
Yeah.
Again, when you get it from an unusual angle, you start to question what you're seeing.
I don't think Anders Fjordback lost it through Garlaban, which is the right-hander, but has definitely found the concrete wall on the inside of the circuit. So this is on his right, and the nose of the car's dragged down the concrete wall. It's made initial contact, possibly front left, to break the light assembly there. And there's that scuffing on the nose, also with the very tip of the nose broken off. So it should be a quick fix. What it means is, though, that Anders Fjordback couldn't continue the session. Maybe a tyre is down or the car just wouldn't refire. And he's out of the car and out of qualifying.
Well, Will Stevens limping back in as well. He's listed as stopped on the circuit. He's clearly not stopped on the circuit. He's got going all over again. Did it take two to tango? There's a question we need to pause. And even at low speed, as Will Stevens brings the Panis Racing number 31 back to the pits, the Orica, rain trickling across the windscreen. Not, I would suggest, as heavy as it was a short while back, but still a factor, most notably at the quicker corners of the circuit, including Scene. Car just going through Scene now, but at very much a bated pace. So hopefully there is no problem for Will Stevens, but
I don't think there is, actually. We're getting S's appearing up and down the timing screen purely because the system can't quite cope with cars moving despite there being a red flag. I think Will was just in an awkward spot, maybe at the start of a quick lap when the stoppage to the session happened, and it's a long run back on effectively the pit lane limiter to do 5.8 kilometres. That does take quite a while.
Yes, in fact, Sergio Campana listed as having completed 3 laps, so he also got onto what would have been a flyer. The red lap is there. Maybe you didn't see the red flag is there. But for a lot of the drivers, they're being sent wide out of Scene to run across
and there's the car, you see.
Curbing.
It's at 9, it's not at 13.
Yeah.
So the track map, we have a digital track map and then the numbers floating around it to tell us where any car is at any one time. And bizarrely, the 20 car being shown at turn 13, it's not got that far. It's a moment, a strange moment, exiting Scene, almost after Scene. We see lots of big crashes where cars turn left when they should be turning right at the end of the Mistral straight. I think Anders has got through the senior corner and is then setting the car up for turn 9, and the car's gone right and into the concrete wall there.
I think he ran, here's my supposition, that he ran wide at Scene, was on the painted stripes, and in rejoining got it slightly wrong, and then it whipped around on him. He went across the circuit to then just clout the concrete wall at the inside towards turn number 9. But the flatbed is there, the crane being about to be put into place to lift it up. Clearly that car can't make it back. From the front view, it looks a little battered, but it looks like it could run back to the pits. I wonder
whether the rear wing is no longer straight as well, or whether that's an optical illusion with the blue lines in the background, but certainly damage on the front left corner. So it'll need a new front section, whole nose piece, which also includes the headlights. Whether the rear deck will be replaced as well, difficult to tell, but the car will be retrieved. It'll be taken back to the garages, probably ineligible to continue though, because it's now received outside assistance and was the cause of the red flag, but I've been caught out by that ruling in the past as well. So we'll wait and see whether Anders Fjordbach can maybe get one quick lap in. The car's too badly damaged, I would say. Having said that,
well, as that's being lifted up onto the truck, we've got 2 cars already waiting at pit exit that determined, they've probably done the maths and reckon they could do an outlap and 2 flying laps. Could they even pinch a third? If they might just squeak in. So 31 is sitting at pit exit. That's Will Stevens. We saw him coming in slowly. Clearly the car was fine. 35 is the second in the queue. That's BHK Motorsports' Sergio Campana. So we've got this awkward situation. Nobody has a flying lap on the board, and we have 5 minutes 55 remaining. It's got to be a very quick outlap if they're going to get more than 2 flying laps under their belts.
Yeah, and it will be down to who can turn the tyres on as quickly as possible. They might be intermediates, they might even be wet weather tyres, depending on what the rain's doing when we restart. But sadly, for the second time, a car leaving the session on the back of a flatbed. We had a trying and truncated GTE session, and this one starting to go the same sort of way.
But the good thing is just recovering a car, whereas with Michael Fassbender, they were recovering a car and fixing the barriers and tyre wall on the outside of the circuit at turn 7. This time around, it will be a case of brushing up a little bit of debris, getting the high-class racing Orica brought away from the side of the circuit, and everyone else going out to play. But I think if anyone went on wets, they're going to be going for inters right now. But again, look up and down the pit lane, check the clouds. In fact, quite a few of the cars had some of their lap times removed for going over the lines, but it doesn't matter. Nobody's put a flying lap on the board. They've lost nothing.
Yeah, 3 cars with their opening lap deleted, which were out laps, obviously, and then the number 21 Dragon Speed cars had a time deleted as well. And there were some peculiar racing lines going on during that session before we found the red flag. So many drivers hunting around for that limited amount of grip. And if you've chosen to go full wets, you're actually looking out for the wetter patches to nurse those tyres. Now, there is a queue forming already at the end of the pit lane. At the number 31 Will Stevens car has found prime spot. And that looks to be the BHK entry of Sergio Campana and his teammate Francesco Draconi, the 34 and 36-year-olds respectively. Campana the gold, Draconi, as you must have in an LMP2 driver combination, the silver. You have to have, your kind of minimum requirement from your driver combo is 1 silver and then 2 platinums or 2 golds. You can go as high as you like for the remaining 2 drivers in LMP2. But a number of teams deciding not to go with their maximum allocation. A chance actually for some bronzes to experience LMP2 as well. For instance, John Fowle and Alexandre Coigny. There are others too. A little earlier on in the weekend, Rookie, the ELMS mascot, serving to find some entertainment away from the track, but that's one of the Rookettes, I think, that he brought to enjoy the weekend at Spa. You might remember the picnic up on the high banking on the Kemmel Straight. Rookie's back again. In absence of the fans, of course, another race meeting, sadly, that has to be held behind closed doors for COVID-19 reasons, and we're missing everybody that was due to be here celebrating our absent fans. Green flag is waved, and the 5 minutes and 55 seconds start to tick down. This is going to be a mad rush now to try and get their cars around to start a flying lap. The outlap could be frenetic. What's happened to Will Stevens? I think he's gone. He's disappeared down the road, and Campana tried to stick with him, but that was a failed bid.
Yeah, you can sense the frustration. The driver's slightly further back in the train of cars waiting to leave the pits, and just come on, you're costing me a second or two that could be vital. So, rain in the air, track is greasy. The clock is counting down, just over 5 minutes remaining in this session. Nobody has a qualifying lap on the board, believe it or not. They were just on the verge of doing so when the red flags curtailed the action, and now, have they guessed right, our waiting times. We've got number 28, the Edex Sport entry, off at the side of the circuit, rejoining. That's Paul Louchatin. So he's not just had a little moment, but he's cost himself track position. But right now, Will Stevens herring clear to make sure that he gets maybe more opportunity than the rest. No spray in his face, that's also a factor. as he makes sure he has a clear lap. And hopefully for his sake, 2 clear laps. High-class racing. Orica is the only one not playing at the moment. The other other 14 out on the circuit, and that's being taken back to the pits for repairs. I'm fairly sure that the damage is light enough so it will start the race, but at a deficit. But right now, Will Stevens setting the pace in terms of winding up to speed towards a first flyer. 2 cars off the track. Have we said that before? Yes, we have. Down at turn number... Well, they got it wrong at turn 3, went across the painted curbing and rejoined at turn 5, including the G-Drive Racing entry. So busy for them.
I did one go off in sympathy of the other. Sophia Flörsch already having her own moment in the Richard Mille Racing Team car. And welcome, Sophia, to the European Le Mans Series. I know you've been on entry lists prior to this, but a conflicting campaign in Formula 3 elsewhere around Europe. There is a clash actually in that championship this weekend, but she's decided to put some preparation in ahead of the 24 hours of Le Mans. So is racing with Beitzke Visser in the number 50 car run by Signitech Alpine, but that is definitely the Richard Mille Racing Team enters Orica 07 for the German and Dutch woman respectively. Meanwhile, 26 Jean-Eric Verne at the wheel as we suggested, and Jean-Eric Verne had to go off more so in avoidance perhaps down at turn 4. Has managed to get ahead now of the 50 car. And was this a moment as well for the Algarve Pro Racing machine a moment or two ago? This was Simon Trummer in 25. Yeah, big wag of the tail. And another off-track moment for Jonathan Hershey. Second of the session, one before the stoppage and now one after it, down at turn 4 again.
Same old, exactly the same problem as Beitzke Visser, but she didn't wag the tail of the dog before she got to the corner, where certainly for Jonathan Hershey the car snapped to the left, to the right and then across the painted curbing. Actually a very good save. And then rotating around, going across the painted curbing backwards, the painted lines on the outside of the circuit. So who's going to stick a time on the board? Will Stevens is the first one. Getting towards the end of the lap, he's just going through Signal, and certainly some further back down. I think we've got some quicker pace from some of the drivers in behind him, but they don't have many opportunities. This one and one further lap for the majority. Will Stevens may get this and 2 more. It's going to be very, very tight indeed.
Visibility decreasing at turn 9 as the cloud really closes in then, and indication maybe that the rain's getting a bit heavier. Well, that might be serve for the conditions to be more judgeable, if you like. More consistent conditions, bizarrely, are favoured by drivers rather than the sort of in and out rain which changes from lap to lap. They'd much prefer it to be completely wet. 1 minute and 50 seconds left on the clock, and Will Stevens gets his Panish Racing car straightened up. This is the run to the line then. Surely it'll put him into provisional pole. It does.
But he won't have time for... He's going on to his final flyer, because that time was a 2 minutes 3 for him, but the fastest time now, Thomas Laurent, 2 minutes 1. Now 2 minutes flat for Alex Brundle. United Autosports go to the top with under 1.5 minutes remaining in this session. The next lap is the one that's going to count. How many drivers will have a lap time deleted for exceeding track limits? United Autosports now first and second, but it's Albuquerque to the top of the pile ahead of Alex Brundle by 1.2 seconds. The Portuguese driver delivering in style. Will he still be there in 2 minutes time?
Well, this is all about where you are on the track. Loic Duval now splits the 2 United Autosports cars for Algarve Pro Racing. So Loic in the number 24 car, second in the Goodyear tyre. That's an interesting comparison. Albuquerque Michelin, Duval Goodyear, and then 2 more Michelin running cars, Alex Brundle and Thomas Laurent. As Jean-Eric Verne goes to the top now in the hour of 01, a 1:58.529 for the Frenchman. He's on the Michelin tyres as well. There he is, turning left through turn number 1 with a slower car in front. He's looking to try and get by Matej Vosizakian, but that's going to wreck Jean-Eric Verne's next lap, and he might have just done it in time there with no further opportunity to improve. Only half a minute to go.
So tricky. Turn 1, he could see that bright yellow and green into Europol car. Hoped it stayed out of the way. It did, but not quite enough. So that really tight line through turn 2, I'm sure, would have compromised Jean-Eric Verne. So let's see, can United Autosports go back to the top, looking for bright times on the screen? Just remember that after the first flying lap, it's Verne from Albuquerque, Duval from Brundle, and Thomas Laurent completing the top 5. 5 is the number of seconds left in the second session. In fact, no, now out comes the checkered flag. It's now or never, Johnny.
This fine mist that has descended on Le Castellet here, affecting then not only track level grip, but also visibility, particularly if you're running in traffic, as well, this whole gaggle of cars working their way through Virage du Lac, Virage du Pont. The 22 car possibly distant enough. There's movement though for Nicolas Lapierre, who crosses the line. He climbs to 5th. Thomas Leroy to the top of the times for Graf, a 158.4. Jonathan Hershey goes even quicker. This track is getting more and more grip, or is he getting wetter on the wet weather tyres? Philippe Albuquerque maybe with provisional pole. Jean-Eric Verne back up to 3rd. I think there was a time deleted in amongst there, but Albuquerque hangs on to his 156.9. Hershey 157.7 to put him 2nd. Alex Brundle has crossed the line to go 4th. And who else are we expecting imminently? 25, 28 cross the line. That doesn't change the top 4 though. Hershey, Duval, Jean-Eric Verne due across the line next, and Jean-Eric Verne I think slowed too much at the start of his lap. Can he improve on a 158.5? He goes 2nd with a 156.961, but that's not quite, 1/100th of a second between Philippe Albuquerque and Jean-Eric Verne. 2 more cars to cross the line are Matevos Isakian and the 50 car of Sophia Fleur. She bags herself a top 10 start, but Albuquerque outpaces Jean-Eric Verne by 0.010 seconds. How slim do you want that margin? And United get another pole position. There was a late spin for Isakian in the Inter-Europol competition car as well.
Just one thing I've noticed, you're talking about 1/100th of a second between them, but in the final sector alone, Jean-Eric Verne was 0.8 of a second quicker through that final sector than Albuquerque did. So conditions may have been improving, or maybe he was just simply getting it right. Don't forget, Verne had the start of that lap slightly compromised going past Isakian, but the latter part of the lap was magical, but not quite magical enough to topple Philippe Albuquerque. That was really knife-edge driving for all of those out there. And for Will Stevens, we saw him making sure he was at the front of the queue. He had a lap time deleted, and that's left him down in 12th out of the 15th runner. Consequences so huge in a wet session like this.
So Philippe Albuquerque proving that he can do it in the dry and the wet. That's 3 pole positions in a row now for the number 22 car. They're having a cracking season, not only with 1 race win under their belts and the championship lead, but also to start at the sharp end could be so crucial in what is predicted to be a weather-affected race. They lead on 42 points. That's now 43 for Philippe Albuquerque and for Phil Hansen, and therefore an 8-point lead over Alex Brundle and Joop van Houten and Will Owen, 3 drivers in the 32 car this season. 32 will start from 5th after nevertheless a good qualifying from Alex Brundle. He was in the low 1:59s, but he couldn't get anywhere close to a 156.951. Jean-Eric Verne, a 156.961. Jonathan Hershey, 2 off-track moments during qualifying, but he finishes in 3rd for Duquesne team. That's a good start for them, probably their best of the season so far. Algarve Pro Racing, the best of the Goodyear shod cars, to start 4th after Loic Duval worked incredibly hard in those changeable conditions. Alex Brundle and Ben Hanley, 3rd row starts. Nicolas Lapierre and Thomas Laurent will start 7th and 8th for Cool Racing and Graf, respectively. The other Algarve Pro Racing car of Simon Trummer, 9th fastest ahead of Sophia Flörsch, despite being off the track at turn 4 on something like her 2nd lap. She came good for a top 10 start. 3rd position then, Jonathan Hershey. It's a qualifying session that will live long in his memory, and not necessarily always for the right reasons. Backwards at turn 4 wasn't ideal, and another off-track moment after that as well. Jean-Eric Verne strapped into the 26. He's been brought back to the championship to join Roman Rusinov and Mikkel Jensen. That looks like a good decision. And by 1/100th of a second, Philippe Albuquerque hangs on to pole position. That's the number 22's 3rd pole of the season. And fingers crossed we can get some reaction from United Autosports to judge the mood down there. They have done all the winning in the prototype parts of the race, prototype parts of the competition this season so far at Le Castellet and at Spa. Will it be more wins for United Autosports? The shrug of the shoulders from Philippe Albuquerque before the session became live. He didn't know what the weather was going to do. Kind of just mattering to the Portuguese. He can just adjust with that 6th sense. And a 156.951 is just about good enough for pole position. But there was action aplenty in that qualifying session. 3 different categories, all setting their grids. David Drew kept us guessing, certainly to the very last moment, to snatch pole position with his final quick lap. And it will be the 77 Proton Competition Porsche at the sharp end. But Proton, bigger fish to fry perhaps, to ensure that they have 2 cars to race at 6:30 tonight. Join us for the race. It's Saturday night European Le Mans Series action from the south of France. A 6:30 start. We will be on air though at 6:10 local time for all the build-up. It's the Le Castellet 240. Join us later.